So, welcome back. This is lesson 5, which talks about the opposite of a number's opposite. So, we already in the last lesson we talked about opposites. So, the opposite of open is closed. The opposite of back is what?
Forward.
Forward. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the opposite of a number's opposite, right? It's like two opposites. So, in the opening exercise, you're told to locate the number -2 and its opposite on a number line. So, the opposite of positive is what?
Negative.
Negative. Alright, so it says locate the number -2 on a number line. So, the opposite of a -2 is simply a what?
-1.
Positive 2. Alright, so the opposite of -2 is a positive 2. So on your number line in the opening activity, you should have put a dot on -2 and a dot on positive 2. Okay? You'll understand this as you have went through lessons 1 through 4, which we talked about opposites. In part B, it says write an integer that represents each of the following situations. So here you're either writing a positive number that represents the situation or a negative number. So on the first one on B, it says 90 feet below sea level. Now, would below represent a positive number or a negative number?
A negative.
A negative number. So in this situation, 90 feet below sea level would be -90. So that's what you would put on B. On part C, you're simply going to read the scenario and use a number line to explain what the integers in this scenario represent. So if it said 10 blocks north, okay, you're thinking about a vertical number line, north will be where? Up or down?
Up.
Up. And so I know my positive numbers are up. So that would represent a positive 10. And then you'll look at all of the different numbers in this scenario, plot them on the number line, and put a dot over those numbers, okay? So now we move into our first example, which says, what is the opposite of 8? And then they want us to illustrate that on a number line. It means that they want us to actually draw it on a number line, okay? So here's my number line. So I'm trying to figure out what is 8 units to the right of 0. So first, let's talk about the opposite of 8. What is the opposite of a positive 8? Remember, the opposite of positive is?
Negative.
Negative. So the opposite of a positive 8 is simply a what?
Negative.
Negative 8, right? So here it says what number is 8 units to the right of 0? So here's 0, and then the right goes that way, right? So let's count over 8 units. This is 1, 2, 3, 4,
5, 6, 7, 8.
So what number is 8 units to the right of 0? What number did we end on?
8.
Simply 8. That's what you'll put there. The next one says illustrate that. So that means that on our number line, just as we did, you should have shown that, okay? The next part says what is the opposite of positive 8? So which direction would I go in?
Left.
Left. Because this is where my negative numbers are located. So I'm starting at 0 again. Go over 8 units. 1,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
So what number is there?
-8.
Negative 8. So what is the opposite of a positive 8? It's simply
A -8.
negative 8. D says what is the opposite of -8, which we already know is
A positive 8.
positive 8. So here's what this means. So basically, if I want to know the opposite, here's what it says. The opposite of an opposite of a number, right? So that sounds like a whole lot, right? So the opposite of a positive 8, let me switch my marker colors. The opposite of a positive 8 is what?
-8.
Negative 8. So here's what that looks like. Take my line from positive 8 all the way until I get to here at -8, right?
Right.
Now what's the opposite of the negative 8?
Positive 8. Positive 8.
Positive. Go back to positive 8. So basically, the opposite of a number is the number that I what?
Is the opposite.
The number that I started with, right? So if I start with 8, right? I started with the positive 8, right? And then I asked you, what's the opposite of a positive 8?
A negative.
Negative 8.
You went right on down to negative 8, right?
Right.
That's the first part of this. Then it says, what's the opposite of an opposite of a number? So I have to go back the other way because now I have to figure out what is the opposite of this negative 8. So now I'm going back. And I ended where I were.
Positive.
Positive 8.
Started with, right?
Yes.
So the opposite of an opposite of a number is simply the original
Number.
Number that you started with, right?
the original number that I started with. Okay? So I'm going to write that all the way out. The original number that you start with. It's really wordy, but it's really simple once you really get it. So make sure that you use this number line and you draw the lines all the way out so that you can really see it. So now I want you to locate the table. So I'm going to let you track this paper so that you can locate the table under exercise while I write it on the board. So in this section, you are to complete the table using the cards in your group. So I'm going to give you index cards with this lesson so that you can complete this table either in partners or by yourself, okay? So once you get to this part on exercise 1, you will be able to do this. So here are the numbers that go to the table. And so I'm going to know, so I may not give you any cards, you may just use these numbers. And I'm going to know whether you watch this video because I'll know if you have the numbers that I gave you. And then I'm going to tell you that I gave you the numbers in the video. So in the first column it says the person. The next column says card A. The next column is the opposite of card A, of card, which is a negative A. And the next one says the opposite of the card. Opposite of opposite is what I'm going to put here. Alright, so do you have a name on your first row?
Yes.
Do you have a name right here in that block on your first table?
Yes, it says person.
Alright, it says person. Alright, so here's the name that we're going to use. We're going to use Jackson.
Jackson.
So I'm giving you an example of what yours could look like. So Jackson, on the next row, I'm going to use Devontae. I'm going to use Cheryl and Toby. Y'all ever heard of Toby? You ever heard of Toby?
Never.
Toby was a slave, alright? And Kunta Kinte. Alright, so in your stack, you may have an index cards that contain the numbers 4, 150, -6, and then a -9. So I'm going to write these numbers. These are the cards that you'll pull. So let's say that we pulled these cards, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, in this section, I want to put the opposite of the card that I pulled. So what's the opposite of a positive 4?
A negative.
Negative 4.
-4. So I'm just going to simply write a what?
Negative
A
4.
negative 4.
So here the opposite of 150 would be
Negative 150.
-150. The opposite of a -6 would simply be
A positive
Positive
6.
positive 6. Y'all getting really good at it. Opposite of a -9 is
A positive 9.
positive 9. So if you think back to the example that I told you when we talked about the opposite of a number, the opposite of a number, we made a statement and said that the opposite of a number is simply the original number that we what?
Start with.
Start with. So if I ask you, what's the opposite of the